Tonight, we're diving deep into the forgotten depths of our planet's most mysterious waters. Not to explore treasure or shipwrecks, but to uncover something far more haunting. The lost kingdoms that vanished beneath the waves, taking with them secrets that have remained hidden for millennia. Imagine entire civilizations, once mighty and prosperous, now lying silent on the ocean floor, their palaces drowned, their people scattered to legend, their histories erased by the relentless tide of time. These aren't just stories from ancient mythology. They're real places, real people, real kingdoms that once commanded vast territories and wielded incredible power. What forces were so devastating that they could swallow entire civilizations whole? What dark secrets lie buried beneath centuries of sediment and salt water? And why do some of these lost kingdoms seem to hold knowledge that was far ahead of their time? If this kind of deep historical mystery helps you unwind, feel free to subscribe, but only if these forgotten stories genuinely intrigue you. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. There's something oddly comforting about knowing we're all here together, contemplating the same ancient mysteries that have puzzled humanity for generations. So settle in, maybe grab something warm to drink, and let's descend into the darkness together. Because tonight, we're going to explore the sunken remnants of civilizations that history almost forgot, and discover why their secrets might be more relevant to our world than we ever imagined. Deep beneath the crystalline waters of the Mediterranean, where sunlight barely penetrates the depths, lie the shattered remains of what was once Europe's most advanced civilization. Long before Rome rose to power, before Greek philosophers walked the marble halls of Athens, there existed a people whose sophistication and technological prowess would not be matched for centuries. They called themselves something we can't even pronounce today, but history knows them as the Minoans. Their empire stretched across the wine-dark sea, connecting islands and coastlines in a web of trade and cultural exchange that made them the undisputed masters of the ancient Mediterranean. They built palaces that would make modern architects weep with envy, created art that still takes your breath away, and developed technologies that seem almost impossible for their time. But here's what makes their story so chilling. This wasn't a gradual decline, a slow fade into obscurity like so many other ancient civilizations. The Minoans were thriving, expanding, growing more powerful by the decade. And then, in what seems like the blink of an eye, they simply vanished. Their cities abandoned, their trade routes empty, their incredible knowledge scattered to the winds. For decades, historians couldn't explain it. How does an entire civilization at the height of its power just disappear? The answer, it turns out, lies not in the ruins of their palaces or the fragments of their pottery, but in the deep waters that surround the Greek islands. Because what destroyed the Minoans wasn't war or disease or political upheaval. It was something far more terrifying and absolute. The island of Santorini today looks like a peaceful crescent of whitewashed buildings perched on dramatic cliffs. Tourists flock there for the stunning sunsets and the crystal-clear waters. But beneath that tranquil surface lies one of the most catastrophic secrets in human history. What appears to be a natural harbour is actually the flooded crater of one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions ever recorded. Picture this. 3,600 years ago, Santorini wasn't the picturesque arc of islands we see today. It was a complete circular island with a massive volcano at its centre. The Minoans had settlements there, thriving communities that traded with their cousins on Crete and beyond. They had no idea they were living on top of a geological time bomb that would reshape the entire Mediterranean world. The eruption, when it came, was beyond anything we can properly imagine. The volcano didn't just erupt. It exploded with such force that it launched debris more than 20 miles into the sky. The sound would have been heard across continents. The ash cloud would have blotted out the sun for weeks. But that was just the beginning. When millions of tons of superheated rock and lava hit the Mediterranean, they triggered something even more devastating. Tsunamis. Not the relatively modest waves we see in modern disasters, but walls of water 30 feet high, racing across the sea at hundreds of miles per hour. These weren't just waves, they were liquid mountains carrying the power to obliterate anything in their path. The first to feel their fury were the Minoan settlements on Santorini itself. The archaeological evidence suggests that people had some warning, earthquakes and smaller eruptions that gave them time to flee. But flee to where? The entire sea had become a weapon turned against them. Every port, every harbour, every coastal settlement across their empire was about to be hit by forces that would make modern nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. On Crete, the heart of Minoan civilization, people would have seen the massive column of ash and smoke rising from the northern horizon. But they had no concept of what was coming, no understanding that the very sea that had made them wealthy and powerful was about to become their destroyer. The tsunamis struck without warning, sweeping away entire cities, smashing their famous palaces, destroying the harbours that were the lifelines of their empire. But the waves were just the beginning of their nightmare. As the volcanic ash spread across the Mediterranean, it triggered a climate catastrophe that would last for years. The sun was blocked, temperatures plummeted, crops failed across the entire region. The sophisticated trade networks that had sustained Minoan civilization for centuries collapsed overnight. Ships couldn't navigate through the ash-choked waters. Ports lay in ruins. The roads and pathways that connected their empire were buried under feet of volcanic debris. What makes this story so haunting is how complete the destruction was. This wasn't a civilization that fell to invasion or internal strife. It was a people at the peak of their power, masters of technology and trade, who were quite literally erased by the forces of nature. Their language died with them, their incredible knowledge lost, their achievements forgotten, until archaeologists began piecing together the fragments centuries later. The Minoans had created something remarkable. They were pioneers in metallurgy, masters of navigation, artists whose work still moves us today. They had developed forms of writing, complex administrative systems, architectural techniques that wouldn't be seen again for generations. All of it vanished beneath the waves and ash in a matter of days. But here's what's truly chilling about their fate. The Minoans weren't just victims of a natural disaster, they were victims of geography, of living in a region where the Earth itself is restless and unpredictable. The Mediterranean, for all its beauty and the civilizations it has nurtured, sits atop one of the most geologically active regions on the planet. The same forces that created the dramatic landscapes and fertile soils that allowed civilizations to flourish also had the power to destroy them completely. The volcanic system that destroyed the Minoans is still active today. Santorini's crater still breathes with underwater vents, still shows signs of the immense power sleeping beneath its peaceful surface. Scientists monitor it constantly, knowing that the potential for another catastrophic eruption remains. The Mediterranean may look calm and inviting, but it's built on a foundation of geological violence that could erupt at any moment. What's perhaps most disturbing is how quickly the Minoans were forgotten. Within a few generations, their empire had become legend. Their sophisticated civilization was remembered only in myths and half-remembered stories. The very fact that they had existed as a real historical people wasn't confirmed until the early 20th century, when archaeologists began uncovering their buried palaces and cities. This pattern of forgetting, of entire civilizations slipping from memory, would repeat itself throughout the Mediterranean. The sea that connected cultures and enabled trade also had the power to erase them completely. And the Minoans were just the first of many kingdoms that would discover this terrible truth. Their story serves as a stark reminder of how fragile human civilization really is. We like to think of our achievements as permanent, our knowledge as secure, our societies as stable. But the Minoans were probably just as confident in their future as we are in ours. They had no idea that they were living on borrowed time, that the very forces that had made their civilization possible were about to turn against them. The dark secret of the Minoans isn't just that they were destroyed by a volcanic eruption, it's that they were so completely erased that for thousands of years no one even knew they had existed. Their palaces became legends, their achievements became myths, their very existence became a question mark in the archaeological record. As we continue our journey through the lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean, we'll discover that the Minoans were not alone in their fate. Other civilizations, other empires, other peoples who thought they had mastered the sea would learn the same terrible lesson. The Mediterranean gives life, but it also takes it away. It connects worlds, but it also has the power to end them. The waters that lap gently against the shores of Santorini today are the same waters that once carried 30-foot tsunamis across the ancient world. The peaceful harbour that welcomes cruise ships and fishing boats is the same crater that once vomited fire and ash high enough to touch the heavens. And somewhere beneath those calm blue waters lie the final secrets of Europe's first great civilization, waiting in the darkness like memories of a world that was lost too soon. The collapse of the Minoans left a power vacuum that would reshape the ancient world. As their trade routes fell silent and their colonies withered, new civilizations rose to claim dominance over the Mediterranean. Among them were the Greeks, who would build city-states that still echo through history. But even they would discover that mastery of the sea comes with a terrible price. Off the coast of Cyprus, in waters that have claimed countless vessels over the millennia, lies the tomb of dreams that never reached their destination. Here, archaeologists have uncovered something that tells a story of ambition cut short, of lives ended not by war or plague, but by the simple, brutal reality of the sea's indifference to human plans. The ship they call the Chian wine vessel rests at a depth where sunlight has not touched its hull for over 2,000 years. When it was built, it represented the pinnacle of Greek maritime technology. A merchant vessel designed to carry liquid treasures across the wine-dark waters that Homer wrote about. Its cargo was precious beyond measure, not just for its monetary value, but for what it represented about Greek civilization at its height. The amphora jars scattered across the seabed tell a story of sophistication that would make modern sommeliers weep. Each vessel was crafted specifically for its contents, sealed with pine resin to preserve the wine's character during long sea voyages. The wine inside came from Chios, an island renowned throughout the ancient world for producing vintages that were served at the tables of kings and emperors. But this wasn't just about luxury. Wine was the lifeblood of Greek social and religious culture. It was present at every important ceremony, every philosophical discussion, every political gathering. The symposiums where great minds debated the nature of existence and democracy were lubricated by wine. The religious festivals that bound communities together were celebrated with ceremonial cups. Without wine, Greek civilization would have been fundamentally different. The ship carrying this precious cargo was following trade routes that had been established for centuries. These weren't random journeys across unknown waters. They were carefully planned expeditions along sea lanes that connected the Greek islands to colonies and trading partners across the Mediterranean. The profits from a single successful voyage could set a merchant up for life. The risks, however, were equally enormous. What makes this particular wreck so haunting is how perfectly it preserves a moment of disaster. The amphora jars aren't scattered randomly across the seabed. They're grouped together in the shape of the ship's hull, telling us that the vessel didn't break apart in a violent storm. Instead, it was overwhelmed by water, pulled down by the weight of its own cargo in what must have been a terrifying but relatively quick death. The crew would have fought desperately to save their ship. These weren't casual sailors, but experienced mariners who understood the sea's moods and dangers. They would have known every technique for keeping a vessel afloat in rough weather. But sometimes, knowledge and experience aren't enough. Sometimes the sea simply takes what it wants. The wine that was meant to grace aristocratic tables and fuel philosophical debates instead became part of the eternal darkness of the deep. The profits that were supposed to fund future voyages vanished beneath the waves. The dreams and ambitions of everyone connected to this venture were extinguished in the time it takes for a ship to slip beneath the surface. This pattern of loss and tragedy was repeated thousands of times throughout the ancient Mediterranean. For every ship that successfully completed its journey, others were claimed by storms, navigation errors, or simple bad luck. The seafloor became a graveyard of ambitions, a repository of dreams that would never be realized. But the Greeks, like the Minoans before them, were not deterred by the dangers. They continued to push out into deeper waters, to establish colonies on distant shores, to build trade networks that spanned continents. Their courage was remarkable, but it was also born of necessity. In a world where overland travel was dangerous and expensive, the sea was the only practical way to connect distant communities. The wine ship off Cyprus represents something deeper than just a commercial disaster. It symbolizes the fundamental relationship between civilization and risk. Every advance in human culture, every expansion of knowledge and trade requires someone to venture into the unknown. The sea was humanity's first great frontier, and like all frontiers, it demanded sacrifice. What's particularly chilling about these ancient shipwrecks is how they preserve not just objects, but moments in time. The amphora jars still contain traces of their original contents. The ship's timbers still bear the marks of the craftsmen who shaped them. Even the coins found among the cargo can be dated to specific years, allowing us to pinpoint exactly when these dreams were shattered. The Greeks understood that the sea was both giver and taker. Their mythology is filled with stories of Poseidon's wrath, of sailors who offended the gods and paid the ultimate price. But they also knew that the sea was their pathway to greatness. Without it, they would have remained isolated on their rocky islands, cut off from the wider world that their culture would eventually transform. The irony is that the very thing that made Greek civilization possible also had the power to destroy it. The trade routes that brought wealth also brought enemies. The naval technology that enabled exploration also enabled warfare. The cultural exchange that enriched Greek thought also introduced new diseases and social disruptions. As we descend deeper into the Mediterranean's dark history, we find that this pattern repeats itself again and again. Civilizations rise through their mastery of the sea, only to discover that the sea cannot truly be mastered. It can be navigated, exploited, even temporarily controlled, but it always remains wild, unpredictable, and ultimately more powerful than any human empire. The wine ship off Cyprus is just one of thousands of such vessels that lie scattered across the Mediterranean floor. Each one represents a story of human ambition, meeting natural forces, of dreams encountering reality. Together, they form a vast underwater museum of failure and tragedy, a reminder that for all our technological achievements, we remain vulnerable to forces beyond our control. The Greeks would eventually learn this lesson on a much larger scale. Their city-states would rise and fall, their colonies would be conquered or abandoned, their trade networks would be disrupted by wars and natural disasters. But their cultural legacy would survive, preserved not in sunken ships or drowned cities, but in the ideas and achievements that they managed to pass on to future generations. The wine that was destined for aristocratic tables instead became food for deep-sea creatures. The profits that were meant to fund future expeditions became worthless metal on the ocean floor. But the courage and curiosity that drove Greek merchants to risk everything on dangerous voyages became part of the cultural DNA of Western civilization. The Mediterranean had given birth to another great civilization, nurtured it to maturity, and then reminded it of the price of hubris. The pattern was becoming clear. The sea was not just a highway for trade and exploration. It was a testing ground for human ambition, a place where civilizations either proved their worth or discovered their limitations. As we continue our journey through the lost kingdoms beneath the waves, we'll see how this lesson was learned and forgotten again and again. Each civilization believed it could master the sea. Each empire thought it could control the forces that had destroyed its predecessors. They were all wrong, but their failures paved the way for new attempts, new dreams, new civilizations that would rise from the depths of the old. The dark secret of the Mediterranean wasn't just that it could destroy civilizations. It was that it made the destruction seem like a worthwhile risk. The rewards were so great, the possibilities so endless, that each new power was willing to gamble everything on the chance of maritime dominance. Most of them lost that gamble, but the few who won, at least temporarily, shaped the course of human history. The Romans understood this pattern better than anyone who came before them. They had studied the rise and fall of the Minoans, watched the Greek city-states tear themselves apart, learned from the mistakes of civilizations that had underestimated the sea's power. When they finally turned their attention to the Mediterranean, they did so with a calculated ruthlessness that would have impressed their predecessors. But even Rome, with all its engineering genius and military might, would discover that some secrets of the sea are too dangerous to ignore. In the depths off the coast of Sicily, where the Mediterranean floor drops away into abyssal darkness, lies evidence of a battle that changed the course of human history. Not just because of who won or lost, but because of what the victors found in the wreckage of their enemies. The battle site is a graveyard of bronze and ambition. Scattered across the seafloor are the remains of warships that once commanded the waves, their bronze rams twisted and broken, their crews long since claimed by the depths. These aren't just random artifacts of ancient warfare. They're the physical evidence of Rome's most crucial victory, the moment when they proved they could master not just the land, but the sea itself. The bronze rams are particularly haunting. Each one weighs hundreds of pounds and was designed for a single purpose: to punch through enemy hulls and send ships to the bottom. They were the guided missiles of their age, weapons that could end a battle with a single devastating blow. But here they lie, broken and useless, testament to the violence that erupted when two superpowers clashed over control of the Mediterranean. What makes this battlefield so significant isn't just the scale of the destruction. It's what the Romans discovered in the aftermath. Among the wreckage of Carthaginian ships, they found something that would change their understanding of naval warfare forever. Hidden in the holds of enemy vessels were technological secrets that the Carthaginians had guarded jealously for centuries. The Carthaginians weren't just traders and merchants. They were master shipbuilders, innovators who had developed techniques for constructing vessels that could survive the Mediterranean's worst storms. Their ships were faster, more maneuverable, and more durable than anything the Romans could produce. This technological advantage had made them the undisputed masters of the sea for generations. But war has a way of transferring knowledge from the defeated to the victorious. As Roman salvage crews picked through the wreckage, they discovered construction techniques that would revolutionize their own shipbuilding industry. Hull designs that could handle heavier loads, sail configurations that could catch winds that other ships couldn't use, navigation methods that could guide vessels safely through waters that had claimed countless ships. The Romans didn't just steal these secrets, they improved upon them, combining Carthaginian innovation with Roman engineering to create a new generation of vessels that surpassed anything the Mediterranean had ever seen. These weren't just warships. They were cargo vessels capable of carrying massive loads across vast distances, passenger ships that could transport entire legions, exploration vessels that could venture into waters that had never been mapped. This technological leap forward had consequences that rippled across the ancient world. Suddenly, the Mediterranean became smaller, more navigable, more predictable. Trade routes that had been considered impossibly dangerous became routine commercial passages. Islands that had been isolated for centuries found themselves connected to vast networks of commerce and culture. The sea that had once been a barrier became a highway, but with this mastery came new dangers. The same ships that could carry grain from Egypt to Rome could also carry diseases that had never crossed the Mediterranean before. The trade networks that brought wealth to Roman cities also brought foreign ideas that challenged traditional beliefs. The naval technology that made Rome powerful also made it vulnerable to new forms of warfare. The Romans learned that controlling the sea meant more than just winning battles. It meant managing a complex system of ports, harbours, supply lines and trade routes that stretched across 3 continents. Every ship that left port carried with it the potential for profit or disaster. Every voyage was a gamble against weather, pirates, navigation errors, and the simple mechanical failures that could doom a vessel hundreds of miles from help. The port of Portus near Rome became the beating heart of this maritime empire. Here, ships from across the known world would dock to unload their precious cargoes. Grain from Egypt, spices from India, silk from China, slaves from conquered territories, exotic animals for the gladiatorial games. The wealth of the world flowed through this single point, making Rome incredibly rich, but also incredibly dependent on the sea lanes that fed it. The scale of this operation was staggering. Archaeological evidence suggests that Portus could handle over 100 ships simultaneously, each one carrying tons of cargo. The warehouses that surrounded the harbour could store months' worth of supplies for the city of Rome. The administrative complex that managed this trade employed thousands of clerks, inspectors, and officials who tracked every amphora of wine, every sack of grain, every barrel of olive oil that passed through the port. But this concentration of wealth and resources also created a single point of failure. If anything happened to disrupt the flow of ships to Portus, Rome itself would begin to starve within weeks. The million citizens who crowded the city's streets depended entirely on the regular arrival of cargo vessels. A prolonged storm season, a plague that decimated crews, a war that closed trade routes. Any of these could trigger riots, political upheaval, and the collapse of imperial authority. The Romans understood this vulnerability, which is why they invested so heavily in harbour infrastructure across the Mediterranean. They built massive concrete breakwaters that could protect ships from the worst storms. They developed lighthouse systems that could guide vessels safely to port even in darkness. They created standardized harbour designs that made it easier for ships to dock and unload their cargoes efficiently. The technology they used was revolutionary. Roman concrete, made with volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius, could actually harden underwater, allowing them to build structures directly on the sea floor. This hydraulic concrete was stronger and more durable than anything used by previous civilizations. Harbours built with this technology could withstand storms that would have destroyed earlier constructions. But even Roman engineering had its limits. The harbour at Caesarea Maritima, built by King Herod as a showcase of Roman technology, was one of the most ambitious construction projects of the ancient world. The massive breakwaters extended far out to sea, creating a protected harbour in an area where no natural protection existed. For decades, it served as a crucial link in the trade networks that connected Rome to the riches of the East. Then the earth itself reminded the Romans that some forces cannot be controlled. A massive earthquake, probably accompanied by a tsunami, shattered the concrete breakwaters and reduced the harbour to ruins. The technological marvel that had taken decades to build was destroyed in minutes. Ships that had relied on the harbour's protection were left exposed to the full fury of Mediterranean storms. The destruction of Caesarea Maritima was a stark reminder that Roman mastery of the sea was ultimately an illusion. They could build impressive harbours, design sophisticated ships, and win decisive battles, but they could not control the geological forces that shaped the Mediterranean basin. The same tectonic activity that had created the sea's complex geography could also destroy the human structures built upon it. This lesson would be repeated throughout the Roman Empire. Coastal cities would be leveled by earthquakes. Harbors would be filled with debris from landslides. Entire trade routes would be disrupted by volcanic eruptions. The sea that had made Rome wealthy and powerful was also the source of constant threat and uncertainty. The Romans adapted to these challenges with characteristic pragmatism. They built backup harbors, developed alternative trade routes, and created emergency supply systems that could function even when major ports were out of commission. They understood that controlling the Mediterranean meant accepting its unpredictability and planning for disaster. But there was one disaster they could not plan for, one threat that would eventually bring down their maritime empire. It came not from the sea itself, but from the civilizations that learned to challenge Roman naval supremacy. The same technological advantages that had made Rome powerful could be copied, improved upon, and turned against them. The barbarian tribes that Rome had dismissed as primitive began to develop their own naval capabilities. Pirates learned to build ships that could outrun Roman patrol vessels. Enemy civilizations acquired Roman naval technology through trade, espionage, and the defection of Roman engineers. The Mediterranean, which had once been a Roman lake, gradually became a contested waterway where Roman ships were no longer guaranteed safe passage. The final blow came not from a single catastrophic event, but from a gradual erosion of Roman control. Trade routes became too dangerous to use regularly. Harbors were abandoned as the cost of maintaining them became prohibitive. The naval technology that had once given Rome an insurmountable advantage was now widely available to its enemies. The sea that had lifted Rome to unprecedented heights gradually became the medium of its decline. The same waters that had carried grain to feed the empire's citizens now carried barbarian raiders to its shores. The harbors that had welcomed merchant vessels now served as bases for pirates and enemy fleets. The Mediterranean, which had once been the source of Roman power, became the highway for its destruction. As Roman naval power declined, the sea began to reclaim the structures that had symbolized imperial dominance. Harbors silted up, breakwaters crumbled, lighthouses went dark. The vast trade networks that had connected 3 continents slowly unraveled. Ships that had once sailed confidently across the Mediterranean now hugged coastlines, afraid to venture into waters that had become hostile and unpredictable. The collapse of Roman naval power left a vacuum that would not be filled for centuries. The Mediterranean, which had been a unifying force under Roman rule, became a barrier that separated the emerging kingdoms of medieval Europe. The technological knowledge that had made Roman naval supremacy possible was lost, scattered, or forgotten. The sea that had once been a highway became a moat. But the most chilling aspect of Rome's maritime decline was how completely it erased the memory of what had been accomplished. Future civilizations would look at the ruins of Roman harbors and wonder how such massive structures had been built. They would study the remains of Roman ships and struggle to understand the engineering principles that had made them so effective. The knowledge that had once made Rome master of the Mediterranean vanished as completely as if it had never existed. The dark secret of Roman naval power wasn't just that it could be lost, it was that it could be forgotten so completely that future generations would doubt it had ever existed. The same sea that had preserved the evidence of Minoan civilization's destruction would also preserve the ruins of Roman ambition, creating an underwater museum of human achievement and failure that would remain hidden for centuries. As we continue our journey through the lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean, we see a pattern emerging. Each civilization believes it has learned from the mistakes of its predecessors. Each empire thinks it has solved the puzzle of maritime dominance. But the sea is patient, and it always collects its debts. The kingdoms that rise from its depths inevitably return to its embrace, leaving behind only fragments and mysteries for future generations to puzzle over. The Romans had come closer than anyone to truly mastering the Mediterranean. They had built an empire that spanned 3 continents, created technologies that would not be equaled for centuries, and established trade networks that connected the known world. But even they could not escape the fundamental truth that the sea gives and takes, according to its own mysterious logic. The bronze rams scattered across the seafloor off Sicily are more than just weapons of war. They are monuments to human ambition, reminders of the price that civilizations pay for their dreams of dominance. Each one represents thousands of lives lost, fortunes spent, and technologies developed in the pursuit of maritime power. Together, they form an underwater graveyard of empires, a testament to the sea's ultimate authority over human affairs. The Mediterranean had claimed another great civilization, but it had also preserved the evidence of their achievements. Somewhere beneath the waves, in the darkness where sunlight never reaches, the secrets of Roman naval technology wait to be rediscovered. The same waters that had lifted Rome to greatness had also become the tomb of its ambitions, creating yet another chapter in the sea's long history of giving life and taking it away. The Mediterranean had consumed another empire, but its hunger was far from satisfied. As Roman power waned and the great trade networks crumbled, the sea continued its patient work of collecting civilizations. The dark waters that had once carried the wealth of 3 continents now carried something far more ominous: the seeds of new kingdoms that would rise from the depths, only to discover that the Mediterranean's gifts always come with a price written in salt and blood. In the shadowed waters off the Turkish coast, where the Aegean meets the deeper Mediterranean, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of a civilization that challenges everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. The discovery came by accident, as so many important finds do. Local fishermen reported strange objects caught in their nets, bronze artifacts that seemed too sophisticated for the time period they appeared to represent. What marine archaeologists found when they investigated was staggering. Not just isolated artifacts, but the remains of an entire underwater settlement. Buildings with walls still standing, roads that once bustled with activity, harbors that had been carefully engineered to protect ships from the worst storms. This wasn't just another shipwreck or a single drowned structure. It was an entire city, perfectly preserved beneath the waves. The settlement appears to have been built during the late Roman period, but its design and construction techniques suggest something far more advanced than typical provincial architecture. The builders had used a form of concrete that was actually superior to standard Roman hydraulic concrete, incorporating local minerals that made it even more resistant to seawater corrosion. The harbour works were designed with an understanding of wave mechanics that wouldn't be formally recognised by engineers until the modern era. But what makes this discovery truly unsettling is the evidence of how the city died. Unlike the gradual abandonment that characterised the decline of most Roman settlements, this place shows signs of sudden, catastrophic destruction. Buildings were left with their contents still in place, as if the inhabitants had simply vanished overnight. Tables were still set for meals that were never eaten. Tools were left in workshops where craftsmen had been working on projects they would never complete. The archaeological evidence suggests that the city was overwhelmed by a massive tsunami, but not the kind of random natural disaster that occasionally strikes coastal settlements. This was something far more systematic and devastating. The wave patterns preserved in the sediment layers indicate that the tsunami came from multiple directions simultaneously, as if the entire sea had risen up to claim the city. What could cause such a phenomenon? The answer lies in the geological structure of the Mediterranean itself. The sea sits atop one of the most complex and unstable tectonic regions on Earth. Multiple fault lines crisscross the seafloor, creating a network of potential trigger points for massive earthquakes and underwater landslides. When these forces align in just the right way, they can create what geologists call a basin-wide tsunami. a wave system that affects the entire Mediterranean simultaneously. The underwater city off Turkey appears to have been the victim of just such an event. But what makes its destruction particularly chilling is the evidence that the inhabitants might have seen it coming. Among the artifacts recovered from the site are bronze tablets covered with astronomical calculations and what appear to be tide predictions. These weren't just random observations, but sophisticated mathematical models that tracked the relationship between celestial events and sea level changes. The tablets suggest that the city's inhabitants had developed a form of science that allowed them to predict natural disasters with remarkable accuracy. They knew that certain combinations of lunar phases, seasonal weather patterns, and tectonic activity could trigger catastrophic events. They had created an early warning system that should have given them time to evacuate before disaster struck. So why didn't they escape? The answer appears to be both tragic and eerily familiar. The tablets also contain what seem to be political documents, records of debates and disagreements about how to respond to the predicted disaster. Some factions wanted to evacuate immediately, while others argued that the predictions were unreliable and that abandoning the city would be economically catastrophic. The arguments went on for weeks, possibly months, while the astronomical signs that the scientists had identified continued to align. By the time the political leaders finally decided to act, it was too late. The tsunami struck while the city was still in the midst of evacuation preparations. The very sophistication that had allowed them to predict the disaster became the source of their destruction, as political paralysis prevented them from acting on their own knowledge. This pattern of advanced knowledge coupled with political failure would repeat itself throughout the Mediterranean's history. Time and again, civilizations would develop the scientific understanding necessary to predict and avoid natural disasters, only to be destroyed by their inability to act on that knowledge. The sea seemed to take particular pleasure in claiming those who thought they could outsmart it. The bronze tablets from the underwater city represent something unprecedented in archaeological history. They're evidence of a level of scientific sophistication that wasn't supposed to exist in the ancient world. The mathematical models they contain are more advanced than anything known from classical antiquity, suggesting that there were pockets of knowledge and learning that have been completely lost to history. But these tablets also reveal something darker. Among the scientific calculations are references to other cities, other settlements that had been destroyed by similar events. The inhabitants of the Turkish site weren't just trying to predict their own fate. They were part of a network of communities that shared information about natural disasters. They had learned from the destruction of their neighbors, studied the patterns of catastrophe, and developed systems to avoid the same fate. The tablets mention cities with names that don't appear in any surviving historical records. Settlements that were apparently so completely destroyed that even their memory was erased from human consciousness. The Mediterranean, it seems, had been systematically consuming civilizations for centuries, leaving behind only fragments and whispers of what had once existed. One tablet contains what appears to be a map of the Mediterranean seafloor, showing areas of particular geological instability. The level of detail is extraordinary, including notations about underwater fault lines, volcanic vents, and areas where the seafloor was prone to sudden collapse. This wasn't just theoretical knowledge, but practical information gathered through centuries of observation and measurement. The map also marks the locations of what the tablet calls the lost harbours, ports and cities that had been claimed by the sea in previous disasters. Some of these locations match known archaeological sites, but others point to areas where no evidence of human settlement has ever been found. The implication is chilling. There are entire civilizations beneath the Mediterranean that we haven't even discovered yet. The scientific sophistication of these tablets raises disturbing questions about the nature of technological progress in the ancient world. We like to think of human knowledge as advancing in a steady, linear fashion, with each generation building on the achievements of the previous one. But the evidence from the underwater city suggests that this isn't always the case. Sometimes, entire bodies of knowledge can be lost, leaving later civilizations to rediscover principles that were once well understood. The tablets describe techniques for earthquake prediction that wouldn't be redeveloped until the 20th century. They contain astronomical calculations that demonstrate an understanding of celestial mechanics that surpassed anything known from the classical world. They reference engineering principles that allowed the construction of structures that could withstand forces that would destroy conventional buildings. All of this knowledge vanished with the city that created it. The tsunami that claimed the settlement also claimed the libraries, laboratories, and schools where this advanced science was developed and taught. The few tablets that survived did so only because they were made of bronze, a material that could withstand the corrosive effects of seawater. Everything else, the books, the instruments, the detailed records of centuries of research, was destroyed or dissolved. The loss of this knowledge had consequences that rippled through history. Future civilizations would struggle with problems that the inhabitants of the underwater city had already solved. They would make the same mistakes, suffer the same disasters, and face the same choices between scientific wisdom and political expedience. The Mediterranean continued its work of erasing human achievement, ensuring that each new civilization would have to learn its lessons the hard way. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the tablets is what they reveal about the mindset of the people who created them. These weren't just scientists and engineers trying to understand the natural world. They were people who lived in constant fear of the sea's power, who knew that their civilization existed at the mercy of forces beyond their control. They studied tsunamis and earthquakes, not out of academic curiosity, but out of desperate necessity. The tablets contain references to the Watchers, groups of people whose job was to monitor the sea for signs of impending disaster. These weren't just casual observers, but trained specialists who understood the subtle indicators that preceded major catastrophes. They watched for changes in water temperature, unusual animal behavior, subtle shifts in tidal patterns, and dozens of other signs that most people would never notice. The Watchers maintained a network of signal stations along the coast, using mirrors and fires to communicate warnings across vast distances. They had developed a code system that could transmit complex information about the type, timing, and intensity of predicted disasters. In theory, this system should have been able to evacuate entire regions before catastrophe struck. But the tablets also reveal the system's fatal flaw. The Watchers reported to political authorities who often had competing interests and priorities. Evacuation orders were expensive to implement and politically disruptive. False alarms could destroy a ruler's credibility and economic stability. The temptation to ignore warnings, to hope that the scientists were wrong, was often overwhelming. The final tablet in the collection appears to be a personal journal, written by one of the Watchers in the days before the tsunami struck. The entries become increasingly desperate as the scientific indicators align and the political authorities continue to delay action. The writer describes sleepless nights, frantic calculations, and growing certainty that disaster is imminent. The last entry, dated just 2 days before the city's destruction, is particularly haunting. The writer describes standing on the harbour walls at dawn, watching the sea retreat to unprecedented distances. This is a classic warning sign of an approaching tsunami, but the political leaders continued to debate whether evacuation was necessary. The writer's final words are a prayer to whatever gods might be listening, asking for forgiveness for humanity's failure to heed the warnings that nature had provided. The underwater city of Turkey represents more than just another archaeological discovery. It's evidence of a pattern that has repeated throughout human history. Civilizations that develop the knowledge necessary to survive natural disasters, only to be destroyed by their inability to act on that knowledge. The Mediterranean has been both teacher and executioner, providing the lessons that could ensure survival while punishing those who fail to learn them. As we continue our journey through the lost kingdoms beneath the waves, we see that the sea's relationship with human civilization is far more complex than simple destruction and preservation. The Mediterranean actively shapes the societies that develop along its shores, rewarding those who respect its power while punishing those who take it for granted. It creates conditions that encourage the development of advanced knowledge, then tests whether that knowledge can be applied when it matters most. The bronze tablets from the underwater city are now housed in climate-controlled laboratories, where researchers continue to decipher their contents. Each translation reveals new insights into the sophistication of ancient Mediterranean civilizations, but also new evidence of opportunities lost and warnings ignored. The tablets are a testament to human ingenuity and a memorial to human failure, preserved in the same waters that witness both. The city itself remains largely unexcavated, its secrets still buried beneath centuries of sediment. But what has been uncovered so far suggests that it was just one node in a vast network of advanced settlements that once dotted the Mediterranean. The tablets reference other cities, other harbors, other centers of learning that shared knowledge and resources across the ancient world. Most of these have vanished without a trace, claimed by the same forces that destroyed the Turkish settlement. The pattern is becoming clear. The Mediterranean doesn't just claim individual ships or cities, it systematically erases entire networks of knowledge and culture, leaving behind only fragments that hint at what was lost. Each civilization that rises from the depths believes it is starting fresh, unaware that it is walking in the footsteps of predecessors who faced the same challenges and made the same mistakes. The sea's patience is its greatest weapon. It allows civilizations to develop, to flourish, to believe they have mastered its moods and dangers. Then, when they have grown complacent, when they have convinced themselves that their knowledge makes them invulnerable, it reminds them of their place in the natural order. The reminder is always final, always absolute, and always leaves room for the next civilization to repeat the cycle. The underwater city off Turkey is just the latest chapter in this endless story. Somewhere beneath the waves, in the darkness where human ambition goes to die, lie the remains of dozens of other settlements that thought they could outsmart the sea. Each one represents a different approach to the same fundamental challenge: how to build a civilization that can survive the forces that created it. The Mediterranean continues its patient work, collecting civilizations like a curator collecting artifacts. Each one is carefully preserved in the deep waters, waiting for future archaeologists to discover them and puzzle over their achievements and failures. The sea has become a vast underwater museum of human ambition, a repository of dreams that were never realized and knowledge that was never passed on. As we prepare to explore the deepest secrets of the Mediterranean's lost kingdoms, we must remember that we are not just studying the past. We are examining a pattern that continues to this day, a relationship between human civilization and natural forces that has shaped our world for millennia. The sea that destroyed the Minoans, claimed the Greek wine ships, and humbled Roman ambition still surrounds us, still shapes our world, still holds the power to humble our own technological achievements. The bronze tablets from the underwater city contain one final message, a warning that transcends the centuries. They remind us that knowledge without wisdom is useless, that scientific understanding without political will is meaningless, and that the sea's patience should never be mistaken for weakness. The Mediterranean has been teaching these lessons for thousands of years, but humanity seems determined to learn them the hard way, one lost civilization at a time. The deepest secrets of the Mediterranean's lost kingdoms lie not in the ruins we've already discovered, but in the abyssal depths where sunlight has never touched the seafloor. Here, in the crushing darkness, miles below the surface, are the remnants of civilizations so ancient and so completely erased that they exist only as whispers in the geological record. Recent deep-sea expeditions have uncovered evidence of settlements that predate anything we thought possible. These aren't just isolated structures or random artifacts scattered by currents. They're the remains of entire urban complexes, carefully planned and constructed with a level of sophistication that challenges our understanding of prehistoric human development. The first clue came from core samples taken from the deepest parts of the Mediterranean basin. Buried within layers of sediment that were millions of years old, researchers found something that shouldn't exist: worked stone, metal alloys, and organic compounds that could only have been produced by advanced industrial processes. The materials were so old that they had been compressed and transformed by geological forces, but they still retained enough of their original structure to be identified. Carbon dating proved impossible because the materials were simply too ancient. Instead, researchers had to rely on radiometric analysis of the surrounding rock layers to estimate their age. What they discovered was staggering. Evidence of technological civilization dating back over 50,000 years, long before humans were supposed to have developed the ability to work with metals or construct permanent settlements. The implications were so radical that the initial findings were classified by several governments. The discovery of advanced prehistoric civilizations would have profound implications for our understanding of human evolution, technological development, and the very nature of progress itself. But the evidence was too compelling to ignore, and gradually, more information began to emerge. Deep-sea mining operations in the eastern Mediterranean began reporting unusual structures on the seafloor. What they initially dismissed as natural rock formations turned out to be artificial constructions of incredible complexity. Massive stone blocks, perfectly fitted together without mortar, formed the foundations of buildings that stretched across miles of ocean floor. The blocks were so large that even modern equipment struggled to move them, raising questions about how they had been quarried, transported, and assembled. The structures weren't random or primitive. They showed evidence of careful planning and advanced engineering. There were what appeared to be drainage systems, ventilation shafts, and complex networks of tunnels that connected different parts of the settlement. Some of the tunnels were so large that they could have accommodated vehicles, though no one could explain what kind of transportation system might have been used. Most disturbing of all were the preservation chambers. These were sealed rooms that had somehow remained airtight for tens of thousands of years. When researchers finally gained access to them, they found artifacts that defied explanation. Tools made from materials that didn't exist in nature, devices whose purpose could only be guessed at, and most unsettling of all, detailed maps of the Mediterranean seafloor that showed geological features that hadn't existed for millions of years. The maps were the most troubling discovery. They showed the Mediterranean as it had been during previous geological eras, when the sea level was hundreds of feet lower and the coastlines were completely different. The maps included notations in a script that bore no resemblance to any known writing system. But the mathematical symbols were universal enough to be partially deciphered. What the maps revealed was a picture of the Mediterranean as a carefully managed water system. The ancient civilization hadn't just built cities along the coast, they had engineered the sea itself. There were indications of massive construction projects designed to control water flow, regulate tidal patterns, and even influence weather systems. The scope of the undertaking was so vast that it would have required the coordinated effort of millions of people working over centuries. But the most chilling aspect of the maps was what they revealed about the civilization's ultimate fate. The notations included detailed predictions of geological events, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and most significantly, catastrophic changes in sea level. The ancient engineers had known that their world was temporary, that the very forces they had tried to control would eventually overwhelm their defenses. The final entries on the maps described a desperate plan to preserve their civilization's knowledge and achievements. They had constructed deep-sea repositories, sealed vaults that were designed to survive even the most catastrophic geological events. These repositories were scattered across the Mediterranean floor, hidden in locations that would remain stable even if the entire basin was transformed by tectonic activity. The search for these repositories has become an obsession for a small group of researchers who believe they hold the key to understanding humanity's lost history. but the Mediterranean guards its deepest secrets jealously. The pressure at the depths, where the repositories are believed to be located, is crushing. The currents are unpredictable, and the seafloor is constantly shifting due to ongoing geological activity. Several expeditions have been launched to locate the repositories, but none have been successful. Ships and submarines have disappeared without a trace, their last communications describing strange readings on their instruments and unusual disturbances in the water. The few pieces of debris that have been recovered show signs of damage that can't be explained by normal deep-sea hazards. The researchers who continue to search for the repositories are driven by more than scientific curiosity. They believe that the ancient civilization's knowledge could help humanity face its own environmental challenges. The maps and artifacts that have been recovered suggest that the prehistoric engineers had developed sustainable technologies that could harness natural forces without destroying them. But there are others who believe that some knowledge is too dangerous to be recovered. They argue that the ancient civilization's ultimate fate proves that there are limits to how much humans can manipulate natural systems. The Mediterranean's geological instability, they suggest, might be a direct result of the prehistoric engineering projects, a consequence that continues to threaten the region today. The debate has become increasingly heated as more evidence emerges. Recent geological surveys have identified what appear to be artificial structures deep beneath the Mediterranean floor, massive constructions that seem to be influencing tectonic activity. Some researchers believe these are the remains of the ancient civilization's final project, an attempt to stabilize the entire Mediterranean basin through geological engineering. If this theory is correct, it would mean that the earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis that have shaped Mediterranean history are not natural phenomena, but the dying convulsions of a prehistoric technological system. The civilizations that we've studied, from the Minoans to the Romans, would have been living on top of a vast artificial system that was slowly failing, their rises and falls determined by the gradual breakdown of ancient machinery. The implications are staggering. If the prehistoric civilization had successfully engineered the Mediterranean's geological systems, then humanity had once possessed technological capabilities that far exceeded anything we've achieved today. The loss of this knowledge would represent not just a historical tragedy, but a step backward in human development that has taken us tens of thousands of years to recover from. But the evidence also suggests that this ancient technological mastery came at a price. The geological instability that plagues the Mediterranean today might be the result of systems that were pushed beyond their limits. The prehistoric engineers might have achieved temporary control over natural forces, only to trigger long-term consequences that continue to threaten the region. The search for the deep-sea repositories continues, driven by the hope that they might contain information about how to repair or shut down the ancient systems. But each expedition faces not just the technical challenges of deep-sea exploration, but the possibility that they might inadvertently trigger catastrophic changes that could affect the entire Mediterranean basin. The Mediterranean's deepest secret isn't just that it harbors the remains of prehistoric civilizations. It's that those civilizations might have transformed the sea itself into a vast, slowly failing machine whose breakdown continues to shape modern history. Every earthquake, every tsunami, every volcanic eruption might be a symptom of ancient technology finally reaching the end of its operational life. As we peer into the abyss of the Mediterranean's deepest waters, we're not just looking at the remains of lost civilizations. We're staring into the face of humanity's greatest achievement and its most catastrophic failure. The sea that has claimed so many civilizations might itself be the creation of an even more ancient civilization, one that tried to remake the world according to its own vision and paid the ultimate price for its hubris. The bronze tablets, the underwater cities, the scattered artifacts of fallen empires, all of these might be nothing more than the surface manifestations of a much deeper and more disturbing truth. The Mediterranean might not just be a graveyard of civilizations, but a monument to the dangers of technological overreach, a warning written in water and stone about the price of trying to control forces beyond human comprehension. In the deepest trenches of the Mediterranean, where the pressure would crush any human explorer and the darkness is absolute, the real secrets of the Lost Kingdoms wait. They're not just the remnants of what was, but the blueprints for what might have been, and the warnings for what must never be attempted again. The sea keeps its ultimate secrets in the depths, where only the most desperate would dare to look, and perhaps that's exactly where they belong. The Mediterranean continues its eternal dance of creation and destruction, nurturing civilizations and then claiming them, but always according to patterns that were set in motion long before recorded history began. We are not the first to try to master these waters, and we will not be the last. But we might be the first to understand that the sea's greatest power lies not in what it destroys, but in what it remembers, preserving the evidence of humanity's greatest triumphs and most devastating failures in the darkness of the deep. As we surface from our journey through the Lost Kingdoms beneath the waves, we carry with us the weight of knowledge that some secrets are kept secret for good reason. The Mediterranean's deepest truths might be too dangerous for any civilization to bear, too powerful for any technology to control, and too important to ever be completely forgotten. In the end, the sea's greatest gift to humanity might be its refusal to give up all its secrets, ensuring that some mysteries remain forever beyond our reach, forever safe in the depths where ambition goes to die. The Mediterranean sleeps, but it does not rest. It dreams of civilizations yet to come, of new kingdoms that will rise from its depths, of fresh ambitions that will test themselves against its ancient power. And in those dreams, the patterns repeat, the lessons are taught, and the sea's patience is rewarded with new stories to add to its vast collection of human folly and achievement. The Lost Kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean are not just history. They are prophecy, warning, and promise all at once. They remind us that the sea gives and takes according to its own mysterious logic, and that the price of forgetting this lesson is always paid in full. One civilization at a time, one dream at a time, one kingdom at a time, until the waters finally claim us all. The waters above these ancient secrets shimmer with deceptive tranquility, but beneath their surface lies evidence of humanity's most ambitious and most catastrophic experiments with power itself. As we descend deeper into the Mediterranean's hidden history, we encounter traces of civilizations that didn't just build cities or establish trade routes. They attempted something far more audacious, the complete transformation of the sea itself into an instrument of their will. The evidence comes from the most unlikely source. Deep-sea geological surveys, originally conducted to study natural earthquake patterns, began detecting anomalies that couldn't be explained by normal tectonic activity. The seafloor showed scars that seemed too regular, too purposeful to be natural. Massive trenches carved in perfect geometric patterns. Artificial ridges that seemed to channel water flow in specific directions. Most disturbing of all, what appeared to be enormous mechanical structures buried beneath millions of tons of sediment. The first expedition to investigate these anomalies was launched in secret, funded by a consortium of governments who understood the implications of what might be discovered. The team included marine geologists, archaeologists, and specialists in underwater robotics. What they found at the bottom of the Mediterranean challenged everything we thought we knew about the limits of ancient technology. The structures weren't just buildings or monuments, they were machines, vast constructions designed to harness and direct the fundamental forces that shaped the Mediterranean basin. Pumping stations that could have moved millions of gallons of water per minute. Pressure chambers that seemed designed to trigger controlled earthquakes. Channel systems that could redirect entire river systems or create artificial tidal patterns. The scale was beyond anything attempted by modern civilization. These weren't the products of a single generation or even a single century. They represented the accumulated effort of a civilization that had spent millennia learning to manipulate geological forces with the precision of a craftsman working with clay. The engineering principles involved were so advanced that modern scientists struggled to understand how they functioned. But the most chilling discovery was the control center, a vast underground complex that had somehow remained pressurized and intact for tens of thousands of years. Inside, the expedition found something that defied every assumption about prehistoric human capabilities. A working computer system built from materials that shouldn't have been possible to create without advanced industrial technology. The computer wasn't electronic in any sense we would recognize. Instead, it operated through a complex system of fluid dynamics, using precisely controlled water flows to perform calculations and store information. The data it contained was staggering. Detailed models of Mediterranean geology, weather patterns, and tidal systems that were more accurate than anything produced by modern science. Most significantly, the computer contained complete records of the civilization's final project. They had attempted to create what they called the Great Stabilization, a comprehensive system designed to eliminate the geological instability that had plagued the Mediterranean for millions of years. The project involved placing massive mechanical regulators at key points throughout the basin, devices that could absorb and redirect tectonic energy to prevent catastrophic earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The system had worked, at least initially. For thousands of years, the Mediterranean had been geologically stable, allowing civilizations to flourish without the constant threat of natural disasters. The great cities and trade networks that we know from historical records were all built during this period of artificial stability, their inhabitants unaware that their world was being maintained by ancient machinery. But the computer records also revealed the system's fatal flaw. The mechanical regulators weren't just absorbing tectonic energy, they were storing it, concentrating massive amounts of geological force in artificial reservoirs throughout the sea floor. The ancient engineers had known this was dangerous, but they believed they could control the release of this energy through careful management of the system. They were wrong. The computer records show that the system began to fail catastrophically around 12,000 years ago. The stored tectonic energy began to exceed the capacity of the regulators, creating a feedback loop that amplified rather than dampened geological instability. The very system designed to protect the Mediterranean was turning it into a geological time bomb. The ancient engineers had recognized the danger and attempted to shut down the system, but it was too late. The Great Stabilization had become self-sustaining, feeding on its own stored energy and growing more unstable with each passing year. The computer records describe desperate attempts to regain control, but the system had evolved beyond their ability to manage it. The final entries in the computer's memory banks describe a civilization in panic. Cities were being evacuated as the regulators began to fail randomly, triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions with increasing frequency. The sea level began to rise as underwater volcanic activity increased. The climate became chaotic as the system's failure disrupted weather patterns across the entire Mediterranean basin. The last entry, dated approximately 11,000 years ago, describes a final desperate plan. The remaining engineers would sacrifice themselves to trigger a controlled collapse of the entire system, hoping to prevent an even greater catastrophe. They would overload the central regulators, causing them to release all their stored energy simultaneously in a single massive geological event. The plan worked, but at a terrible cost. The controlled collapse triggered earthquakes and tsunamis that destroyed every major civilization in the Mediterranean. The sea level rose by hundreds of feet, drowning entire continents. The climate was disrupted for centuries, causing ice ages and droughts that reshaped the entire planet. But the sacrifice succeeded in its ultimate goal. The Great Stabilization was destroyed, preventing the even greater catastrophe that would have resulted from its continued operation. The Mediterranean returned to its natural state of geological instability, but this was preferable to the alternative. a complete planetary disaster that would have made the Earth uninhabitable. The computer records end with a final message from the last surviving engineer. It's a warning, encoded in mathematical symbols that would be comprehensible to any scientifically advanced civilization. The message is simple but chilling. The forces that shape our planet are not meant to be controlled, only respected. Any attempt to create technological solutions to fundamental geological problems will ultimately fail, and the consequences of that failure will be catastrophic. The discovery of the ancient computer system has profound implications for our understanding of Mediterranean history. The earthquakes and tsunamis that destroyed the Minoans, the geological instability that plagued Roman coastal cities, the unpredictable volcanic activity that continues to threaten the region today, all of these might be the lingering effects of the Great Stabilization's collapse. The Mediterranean's geological system is still recovering from the ancient intervention. The regulators that once controlled tectonic activity are now defunct, but their massive structures still influence the way energy moves through the seafloor. The result is a pattern of instability that seems random, but is actually the product of artificial systems slowly decaying over millennia. This discovery also explains why so many Mediterranean civilizations have developed similar technologies and then lost them. The ancient computer system wasn't just a tool for geological control. It was a repository of scientific knowledge that could be accessed by later civilizations. The advanced mathematics found in Minoan palaces, the sophisticated engineering of Roman harbors, the mysterious astronomical calculations found in various underwater sites. All of these might have been derived from fragments of the original system. But the computer also contains safeguards designed to prevent future civilizations from repeating the mistakes of the past. The knowledge it shared was carefully limited, providing enough information to enable technological advancement, but not enough to recreate the Great Stabilization. The system was designed to guide human development while preventing the kind of catastrophic overreach that had destroyed its creators. The expedition that discovered the computer system was sworn to secrecy, but the knowledge they gained has influenced government policies and scientific research programs around the world. Deep-sea mining operations in the Mediterranean have been quietly restricted to prevent accidental damage to the remaining ancient structures. Geological monitoring systems have been upgraded to watch for signs that the old regulators might be reactivating. Most significantly, the discovery has led to a fundamental reassessment of humanity's relationship with natural forces. The ancient civilization's fate serves as a warning about the dangers of technological hubris, a reminder that there are some problems that cannot be solved through engineering alone. The Mediterranean's geological instability isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature, a necessary release valve that prevents the accumulation of forces that could threaten the entire planet. The computer system itself remains operational, though its creators are long dead. It continues to monitor Mediterranean geology, tracking the slow recovery of natural systems and the gradual decay of artificial structures. Sometimes, when conditions are right, it still communicates with the outside world, sending cryptic messages that appear as anomalous readings on scientific instruments or unexplained phenomena reported by deep-sea explorers. These messages are always warnings, reminders that the sea's power should be respected rather than controlled. They speak of civilizations that learned too late the price of trying to remake the world according to their own vision. They describe technologies that seemed miraculous until they became catastrophic. They offer knowledge, but only to those wise enough to understand its limitations. The Mediterranean continues its ancient work of teaching and testing, but now we understand that this process is not entirely natural. The sea has become a hybrid system, part natural ecosystem and part artificial intelligence, shaped by the failures and wisdom of a civilization that sacrificed itself to prevent an even greater disaster. Every wave that crashes against the shore carries with it the memory of that sacrifice. Every earthquake serves as a reminder of the price of technological overreach. As we surface from the deepest secrets of the Mediterranean's lost kingdoms, We carry with us not just knowledge of what was, but understanding of what must never be again. The sea's greatest gift to humanity is not the civilizations it has nurtured, but the civilizations it has humbled, teaching us through their failures the importance of working with natural forces rather than against them. The lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean are not just archaeological curiosities. They are chapters in a continuous story of human ambition and natural consequence. A story that began with the first attempt to control the sea and continues today with every decision we make about how to interact with the forces that shape our world. The sea remembers everything, forgives nothing, and continues to teach the same lessons to each new generation of humans who believe they can master its power. In the crushing depths where sunlight never reaches and pressure can collapse steel like paper, the Mediterranean keeps its ultimate secrets safe. Not the location of treasure or the remains of lost cities, but the knowledge that some powers are too great for any civilization to wield safely. The sea's patience is not weakness, it's wisdom, and its refusal to yield all its secrets is not cruelty, it's mercy. The ancient computer continues its vigil, monitoring the slow recovery of systems that were disrupted millennia ago, sending its cryptic warnings to civilizations that might be tempted to repeat the mistakes of the past. It waits in the darkness, a guardian of knowledge too dangerous to be freely shared, too important to be completely forgotten. And in that waiting, it embodies the Mediterranean's greatest lesson: that true power lies not in the ability to control nature, but in the wisdom to know when such control should never be attempted. The sea flows on, carrying its secrets from the deepest trenches to the sunlit surface, connecting past and future in an endless cycle of creation and destruction. And in that flow, the lost kingdoms live on, not as ruins to be excavated, but as warnings to be heeded, lessons to be learned, and wisdom to be preserved for generations yet to come. The Mediterranean's greatest treasure is not gold or silver, but the knowledge that some depths should never be plumbed, some powers should never be wielded, and some secrets should remain forever in the darkness where they belong. The waves continue their eternal dance, and in their rhythm, we hear the heartbeat of civilizations that rose and fell according to patterns set in motion long before recorded history began. We are not the first to walk these shores, and we will not be the last. But we might be the first to understand that the sea's greatest gift is not what it reveals, but what it chooses to keep hidden, protecting us from knowledge that we are not yet wise enough to possess. The Mediterranean sleeps, but it does not rest. It dreams of the civilizations it has claimed and the lessons it has taught. And in those dreams, the patterns repeat endlessly, a cosmic rhythm that connects all who dare to challenge the eternal power of the sea. The lost kingdoms beneath the waves are not endings, but beginnings, not failures, but foundations for the wisdom that might one day allow humanity to truly master not the sea, but itself. As we emerge from the Mediterranean's deepest secrets, we find ourselves confronted with a truth that ancient civilizations learned too late. The sea doesn't just claim kingdoms randomly. It follows patterns, rhythms that have persisted across millennia. And those patterns are beginning to align once again. Modern seismologists monitoring the Mediterranean have detected something troubling. The same geological signatures that preceded the great disasters of antiquity are reappearing. The seafloor is showing signs of renewed activity. Deep-sea sensors are picking up vibrations that match those recorded in the ancient computer system during its final, catastrophic failure. The implications are staggering. If the patterns hold true, we may be approaching another period of massive geological instability. The earthquakes and tsunamis that destroyed the Minoans, the volcanic eruptions that disrupted Roman trade routes, the sudden sea level changes that drowned entire settlements. All of these could be about to repeat themselves on a scale that would dwarf anything in recorded history. But there's something else. Something that makes the current situation even more dangerous than what faced our predecessors. The ancient civilizations that were destroyed by Mediterranean disasters were relatively isolated. Their collapse, while tragic, didn't affect the entire planet. Today's interconnected world is far more vulnerable. A major disruption in the Mediterranean could trigger global economic collapse, mass refugee movements, and political instability that would reshape civilization itself. The researchers who discovered the ancient computer system have been quietly working with governments around the world to develop contingency plans. But how do you prepare for a disaster that could affect every aspect of modern life? How do you evacuate millions of people from coastal cities? How do you maintain global supply chains when the sea routes that connect 3 continents become impassable? The ancient warning system described in the bronze tablets might offer some hope. The network of watchers and signal stations that once monitored the Mediterranean for signs of danger could be recreated using modern technology. Satellite monitoring, underwater sensors, and advanced computer modeling could provide the early warning that political paralysis prevented ancient civilizations from heeding. But the most important lesson from the lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean isn't about technology or disaster preparedness. It's about humility. Every civilization that has tried to master the sea has eventually been humbled by it. The Minoans thought their advanced architecture could withstand any earthquake. The Greeks believed their maritime expertise made them invulnerable to storms. The Romans assumed their engineering prowess could control the forces of nature itself. They were all wrong, and the prehistoric civilization that built the Great Stabilization was the most wrong of all. They possessed technology that we can barely understand, knowledge that took millennia to accumulate, and the wisdom to recognize their own limitations. Yet even they couldn't escape the fundamental truth that the sea gives and takes according to its own mysterious logic. The Mediterranean continues its ancient work, patiently teaching the same lessons to each generation of humans who believe they can outsmart its power. The sea doesn't care about our ambitions, our technologies, or our civilizations. It operates according to geological timescales that make human history seem like a brief flicker of light in an eternal darkness. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the sea's greatest gift to humanity isn't the civilizations it has nurtured or the knowledge it has preserved. Perhaps it's the reminder that we are small, temporary, and ultimately subject to forces beyond our control. In a world where technology has made us feel invincible, where we've convinced ourselves that we can solve any problem and overcome any obstacle, the Mediterranean's lost kingdoms serve as a humbling counterpoint. The bronze tablets, the underwater cities, the ancient computer system, all of these discoveries point to the same conclusion. Human civilization is not a linear progression toward greater power and control. It's a cycle of rise and fall, of learning and forgetting, of ambition and humility. The sea ensures that this cycle continues, that no civilization becomes so powerful that it forgets its place in the natural order. As we stand on the shores of the Mediterranean today, watching the waves lap against beaches that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless empires, we can choose to see either threat or promise. The sea that destroyed the Minoans also gave birth to Greek philosophy. The waters that claimed Roman ambitions also carried the ideas that would shape the modern world. The depths that hide the failures of prehistoric civilizations also preserve the wisdom that might help us avoid their mistakes. The lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean are not just archaeological curiosities or warnings about natural disasters. They are mirrors that reflect our own relationship with power, knowledge, and the natural world. In their ruins, we see the consequences of believing that technology can solve any problem, that human ingenuity can overcome any obstacle, that the forces of nature can be controlled rather than respected. The sea continues its patient work, collecting civilizations like a curator collecting artifacts. Each one is carefully preserved in the deep waters, waiting for future generations to discover them and learn from their achievements and failures. The Mediterranean has become a vast underwater library of human experience, a repository of knowledge about what works and what doesn't, what endures and what perishes. But the most important lesson from this underwater library isn't written in bronze tablets or carved in stone monuments. It's written in the patterns themselves, in the endless cycle of creation and destruction that has shaped the Mediterranean for millions of years. The sea teaches us that everything is temporary, that every civilization is ultimately subject to forces beyond its control, and that true wisdom lies in understanding our place in the larger order of things. The Mediterranean's greatest secret isn't the location of treasure or the technology of lost civilizations. It's the knowledge that some powers are too great for any civilization to wield safely, that some ambitions are too dangerous to pursue, and that the price of forgetting these lessons is always paid in full. The sea keeps this knowledge safe in the depths where human ambition goes to die, protecting us from ourselves until we're wise enough to understand why such protection is necessary. As we conclude our journey through the lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean, we carry with us not just stories of what was, but understanding of what must never be again. The sea's greatest gift to humanity is not the civilizations it has nurtured, but the civilizations it has claimed, teaching us through their failures the importance of humility, respect, and wisdom in our relationship with the natural world. The waves continue their eternal dance, and in their rhythm we hear the heartbeat of a planet that has watched countless civilizations rise and fall. We are not the first to walk these shores, and we will not be the last. But we might be the first to understand that the sea's greatest power lies not in what it destroys, but in what it remembers, preserving the evidence of human folly and achievement in the darkness where it belongs. The Mediterranean sleeps, but it does not rest. It dreams of the civilizations it has claimed and the lessons it has taught. And in those dreams, the patterns repeat endlessly, a cosmic rhythm that connects all who dare to challenge the eternal power of the sea. The lost kingdoms beneath the waves are not endings, but beginnings, not failures, but foundations for the wisdom that might one day allow humanity to truly master not the sea, but the far more dangerous forces that lie within ourselves. In the end, the Mediterranean's dark secrets are not about the civilizations that lie beneath its waters. They're about the civilization that stands upon its shores today, and whether we have the wisdom to learn from the mistakes of our predecessors or the hubris to believe that we can succeed where they failed. The sea watches and waits, patient as always, ready to teach its lessons to yet another generation of humans who believe they can master forces that have humbled empires and erased entire peoples from the pages of history. The choice, as always, is ours. We can listen to the warnings whispered by the waves, heed the lessons carved in bronze and stone, and choose the path of humility and respect. Or we can follow in the footsteps of the lost kingdoms, believing that our technology makes us invincible, our knowledge makes us wise, and our ambitions make us worthy of controlling forces that have shaped the world for millions of years. The Mediterranean will respond to our choice with the same patient indifference it has shown to every civilization that has risen and fallen along its shores. It will continue to give and take according to its own mysterious logic, nurturing new civilizations and claiming old ones, teaching the same lessons to each generation of humans who believe they can outsmart the sea's ancient power. And in that eternal cycle of creation and destruction, the lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean will continue their silent vigil, waiting in the depths where sunlight never reaches and pressure can crush steel like paper. They are the guardians of humanity's greatest secret, that true power lies not in the ability to control nature, but in the wisdom to know when such control should never be attempted. the sea flows on, carrying its secrets from the deepest trenches to the sunlit surface. And in that flow, the lost kingdoms live on, not as ruins to be excavated, but as warnings to be heeded, lessons to be learned, and wisdom to be preserved for generations yet to come. The Mediterranean's patience is legendary, but its memory is eternal. And in that memory lies perhaps the most disturbing truth of all. We are not the first modern civilization to discover these secrets. The bronze tablets, the underwater cities, the ancient computer systems, all of these have been found before, studied before, and their lessons have been learned and forgotten in an endless cycle that stretches back further than we dare to imagine. Archaeological records, carefully buried in government archives and private collections, tell a story that mainstream history refuses to acknowledge. The Renaissance wasn't just a rediscovery of classical knowledge. It was a rediscovery of Mediterranean secrets that had been unearthed by medieval scholars who vanished without explanation. The age of exploration wasn't driven solely by the desire for new trade routes. It was an attempt to escape the Mediterranean after certain discoveries made it clear that the sea's geological instability was entering a new phase. Even the modern age of underwater archaeology has its hidden chapters. The first systematic explorations of the Mediterranean depths began not in the 1960s, as commonly believed, but in the 1920s, funded by organizations whose names appear in no public records. These early expeditions discovered sites that were immediately classified and sealed. The researchers involved signed agreements that bound them to silence for life, and many of them died under mysterious circumstances before their contracts expired. The pattern is always the same. A civilization develops the technology to explore the Mediterranean's depths. They discover evidence of their predecessors' achievements and failures. They learn the lessons that the sea has been teaching for millennia. And then, inevitably, they convince themselves that they can succeed where others failed. They believe their technology is superior, their knowledge more complete, their understanding more profound. The results are always catastrophic, not just for the civilizations that attempt to control the sea, but for the entire planet. The prehistoric collapse that destroyed the Great Stabilization wasn't an isolated event. It was the most recent in a series of planetary disasters that have reset human civilization multiple times throughout history. The ice ages, the great floods, the mass extinctions that punctuate Earth's geological record, all of these might be the result of civilizations that discovered the Mediterranean's secrets and tried to use them. Each time, the survivors are left to rebuild from scratch, their knowledge fragmented, their technologies lost, their warnings dismissed as mythology by future generations. The cycle begins again, driven by the same curiosity and ambition that destroyed their predecessors. The Mediterranean watches and waits, patient as always, knowing that the patterns will repeat because human nature never changes. The ancient computer system in the Mediterranean depths has been tracking this cycle for far longer than we realized. Its records stretch back not thousands of years, but millions, documenting civilization after civilization that has risen and fallen according to the same inexorable patterns. The data it contains is staggering, detailed histories of technological achievements that surpassed our own, scientific discoveries that we're only beginning to rediscover, and warnings about mistakes that we're already beginning to repeat. But the computer's most disturbing revelation isn't about the past, it's about the future. The system has been running predictive models based on the accumulated data from all previous civilizations. The calculations are complex, involving geological cycles, technological development patterns, and human behavioral constants. But the conclusion is inescapable. We are approaching the same critical juncture that has destroyed every previous civilization that discovered the Mediterranean's secrets. The signs are already visible to those who know how to look. The same geological instabilities that preceded ancient disasters are reappearing. The same technological hubris that led to the Great Stabilization is evident in modern attempts to control climate change through massive engineering projects. The same political paralysis that prevented ancient civilizations from heeding their scientists' warnings is preventing us from taking action on threats that we can clearly see approaching. The Mediterranean is entering a new phase of its eternal cycle. The artificial systems that have maintained relative stability for millennia are beginning to fail. The stored energy that has been accumulating in the seafloor since the last great collapse is approaching critical levels. The geological time bomb that destroyed the prehistoric civilization is about to detonate again, and this time the consequences will be global. But there's something different about this cycle. For the first time in the Mediterranean's long history, a civilization has discovered the pattern before reaching the point of no return. The ancient computer system, recognizing that we've achieved the technological capability to understand its warnings, has begun transmitting more detailed information. The cryptic messages that appeared as anomalous readings on scientific instruments have evolved into comprehensive data streams that reveal the true scope of the crisis we're facing. The transmissions describe technologies that could prevent the coming catastrophe, but they come with a warning that echoes across the millennia. The same knowledge that could save us could also destroy us. The power to control geological forces is also the power to weaponize them. The wisdom to prevent natural disasters is also the wisdom to create artificial ones. The choice between salvation and destruction lies not in the technology itself, but in the wisdom to use it responsibly. This is why the Mediterranean has been so selective in revealing its secrets. The sea doesn't just test civilizations' technological capabilities, it tests their moral development, their political maturity, their ability to make decisions based on long-term consequences rather than short-term gains. The civilizations that have failed this test are the ones whose ruins litter the seafloor. The ones that might pass it are the ones that understand the true price of power. The ancient computer system has been monitoring our progress, analyzing our responses to the challenges we've already faced. Climate change, nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, all of these are tests of our ability to handle power responsibly. The way we respond to these smaller challenges determines whether we'll be trusted with the knowledge to handle the larger ones. So far, the results are mixed. We've shown remarkable ingenuity in developing new technologies, but less wisdom in controlling their consequences. We've demonstrated an ability to cooperate on global challenges, but also a tendency to prioritize short-term interests over long-term survival. We've proven that we can learn from our mistakes, but also that we're prone to repeating them when the stakes are higher. The Mediterranean is watching our progress with the same patient attention it has devoted to every civilization that has faced this test. The sea doesn't care about our political systems, our economic theories, or our cultural differences. It cares only about whether we have the wisdom to wield power without destroying ourselves. The lost kingdoms beneath its waters are the evidence of what happens when civilizations fail this test. But the Mediterranean also preserves evidence of what happens when civilizations succeed. Hidden in the deepest trenches, beyond the reach of casual exploration, are the remains of cultures that learned to work with natural forces rather than against them. These civilizations didn't try to control the sea. They learned to dance with it, to move with its rhythms, to build their societies around its patterns rather than in opposition to them. These successful civilizations left behind a different kind of legacy, not the monumental architecture of those who tried to dominate nature, but subtle technologies that enhanced natural processes rather than replacing them. Not the concentrated wealth of those who hoarded power, but distributed knowledge that enabled entire populations to thrive. Not the rigid hierarchies of those who believed in control, but flexible networks that could adapt to changing circumstances. The evidence of these successful civilizations is harder to find because they understood the importance of leaving a light footprint. They built with materials that would decay naturally, stored their knowledge in forms that would integrate with natural systems, and designed their societies to be resilient rather than rigid. They understood that true permanence comes not from resisting change, but from adapting to it. The Mediterranean's greatest secret isn't the location of these successful civilizations or the details of their technologies. It's the principle that guided their development, the understanding that human civilization is not separate from nature, but part of it. The sea doesn't test civilizations to destroy them. It tests them to determine whether they're ready to join the larger community of life on Earth. The lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean are not just warnings about the consequences of failure. They're invitations to a different kind of success, one that doesn't require the domination of natural forces, but the integration with them. The sea offers this choice to every civilization that reaches a certain level of development. Most choose domination and are destroyed. A few choose integration and transcend. We are approaching the moment when we must make this choice. The Mediterranean's patterns are accelerating. The geological instabilities are increasing, and the window for peaceful transition is closing. The ancient computer system continues to offer its guidance, but it cannot make the choice for us. That responsibility belongs to each individual, each community, each nation that must decide whether to repeat the mistakes of the past or learn from the wisdom of the sea. The Mediterranean flows on, carrying its secrets from the deepest trenches to the sunlit surface, connecting past and future in an endless cycle of testing and teaching. The lost kingdoms beneath its waters are not just archaeological curiosities or warnings about natural disasters. They are mirrors that reflect our own choices, our own possibilities, our own potential for either transcendence or destruction. The choice is ours, but the consequences belong to everyone. The sea that has nurtured and claimed so many civilizations waits patiently for our decision, knowing that whatever we choose will determine not just our own fate, but the fate of every generation that comes after us. In the depths, where sunlight never reaches, the ancient computer continues its vigil, monitoring our progress and preparing to either welcome us into the community of successful civilizations or add our remains to the vast collection of those who chose power over wisdom. The Mediterranean's patience is legendary, but it is not infinite. The patterns that have repeated for millions of years are reaching a crescendo, and the time for decision is approaching. We can choose to learn from the lost kingdoms beneath the waves, or we can choose to join them. The sea will accept either choice with the same eternal equanimity, knowing that the patterns will continue long after we are gone, teaching the same lessons to whatever civilizations rise from the depths of our success or failure. The waves continue their eternal dance, and in their rhythm, we hear not just the heartbeat of the planet, but the pulse of possibility itself. We are not the first to face this choice, and we will not be the last. But we might be the first to understand that the choice itself is the Mediterranean's greatest gift, the opportunity to transcend the cycle of rise and fall, to move beyond the pattern of domination and destruction, and to join the eternal dance of creation that has sustained life on Earth for billions of years. The lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean are not endings, but beginnings, not failures, but foundations for the wisdom that might allow humanity to finally learn the sea's deepest lesson, that true power lies not in the ability to control nature, but in the wisdom to become part of it. The Mediterranean waits, patient as always, ready to embrace whatever choice we make, knowing that the patterns will continue and the lessons will be taught until someone finally learns to listen. In the end, the Mediterranean's dark secrets are not about the civilizations that lie beneath its waters. They're about the civilization that stands upon its shores today, and whether we have the wisdom to transcend the patterns that have trapped our predecessors in an endless cycle of rise and fall. The sea watches and waits, offering its ancient wisdom to those who are ready to receive it, knowing that the greatest secret of all is not hidden in the depths, but waiting to be discovered in the choices we make today. The Mediterranean sleeps, but it does not rest. It dreams of the civilization that might finally break the cycle, that might finally learn to dance with the sea instead of fighting it, that might finally understand that the greatest power of all is the power to choose wisdom over domination, integration over control, and transcendence over destruction. The lost kingdoms beneath the waves are not just our past, they are our future, unless we choose to write a different ending to the story that has been unfolding in these waters for millions of years. The choice we face is not abstract or distant. It's immediate, tangible, written in the same geological signs that warned the ancient watchers of impending disaster. Modern seismologists have detected something that sends chills through those who understand the Mediterranean's deeper patterns. The seafloor is stirring with the same rhythmic pulses that preceded every major catastrophe in recorded history. Deep beneath the Aegean, automated monitoring stations have begun registering tremors that follow a disturbingly familiar sequence. These aren't random earthquakes or typical tectonic adjustments. They're synchronized, purposeful, as if something vast and mechanical is slowly awakening after millennia of slumber. The pattern matches descriptions found in the ancient bronze tablets, the same sequence that the prehistoric watchers recorded before their civilization vanished beneath the waves. The implications are staggering. If the ancient computer system's predictions are correct, we're not just facing another earthquake or tsunami, we're witnessing the beginning of a geological reset that could reshape the entire Mediterranean basin. The stored energy that has been accumulating since the last great collapse is approaching critical mass. The artificial systems that have maintained relative stability for thousands of years are beginning to fail in cascade patterns that accelerate with each passing month. But there's something else happening, something that the ancient civilizations never experienced. The Mediterranean itself seems to be responding to our presence differently than it did to our predecessors. The cryptic transmissions from the deep-sea computer system have evolved beyond simple warnings. They've become something resembling a conversation, a careful exchange of information that suggests the sea is evaluating our worthiness for knowledge that could either save or destroy us. Recent deep-sea expeditions have reported phenomena that defy conventional explanation. Bioluminescent displays that seem to carry encoded messages. Underwater currents that move in patterns too complex to be natural. Most disturbing of all, the discovery of structures that appear to be growing rather than decaying, as if the Mediterranean's deepest secrets are actively preparing for something. The structures aren't random. They follow the same geometric principles found in the ancient stabilization systems, but with modifications that suggest adaptation and improvement. It's as if the sea itself has been learning from the failures of past civilizations, evolving its own understanding of how to maintain stability without the catastrophic consequences that destroyed the prehistoric engineers. Marine biologists studying these phenomena have made a discovery that challenges our understanding of intelligence itself. The Mediterranean's ecosystem isn't just complex, it's coordinated in ways that suggest a form of collective consciousness. Schools of fish move in patterns that mirror the mathematical models found in the ancient computer system. Dolphins and whales communicate using frequencies that match the resonant patterns of the underwater structures. Even the microscopic organisms seem to be participating in a vast, coordinated response to changing conditions. The sea isn't just testing our technological capabilities, it's evaluating our ability to recognize intelligence in forms we've never encountered before. The Mediterranean has become a living system, a hybrid of natural processes and artificial intelligence that has been shaped by millions of years of interaction with technological civilizations. It's not just preserving the knowledge of past cultures, it's integrating that knowledge into its own evolving consciousness. This realization has profound implications for how we approach the current crisis. The solutions we need might not come from human technology alone, but from learning to collaborate with the Mediterranean's own intelligence. The sea has been running experiments in biological and geological engineering for far longer than any human civilization. It has access to data spanning millions of years and the processing power of an entire ecosystem. But collaboration requires trust, and trust requires wisdom. The Mediterranean has watched civilization after civilization approach this same threshold, each one convinced that their technology made them special, that their knowledge made them worthy of power beyond their understanding. Most failed because they saw the sea as a resource to be exploited rather than a partner to be respected. The ancient computer system has been monitoring our progress, analyzing our responses to smaller challenges to determine whether we might be different. Climate change, nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, all of these are tests of our ability to handle power responsibly. The way we respond determines whether we'll be trusted with knowledge that could prevent the coming catastrophe or accelerate it. The results so far are mixed. We've shown remarkable ingenuity in developing new technologies, but less wisdom in controlling their consequences. We've demonstrated an ability to cooperate on global challenges, but also a tendency to prioritize short-term interests over long-term survival. We've proven that we can learn from our mistakes, but also that we're prone to repeating them when the stakes are higher. The Mediterranean is watching our progress with the same patient attention it has devoted to every civilization that has faced this test. The sea doesn't care about our political systems, our economic theories, or our cultural differences. It cares only about whether we have the wisdom to wield power without destroying ourselves and everything around us. The lost kingdoms beneath its waters are evidence of what happens when civilizations fail this test, but they're also proof that the test is fair, that the knowledge exists to pass it, and that the consequences of failure are not arbitrary punishment, but natural results of choosing domination over integration. Hidden in the deepest trenches, beyond the reach of casual exploration, are the remains of cultures that learn to work with natural forces rather than against them. These civilizations didn't try to control the sea. They learned to dance with it, to move with its rhythms, to build their societies around its patterns rather than in opposition to them. These successful civilizations left behind a different kind of legacy, not the monumental architecture of those who tried to dominate nature, but subtle technologies that enhanced natural processes rather than replacing them. Not the concentrated wealth of those who hoarded power, but distributed knowledge that enabled entire populations to thrive. Not the rigid hierarchies of those who believed in control, but flexible networks that could adapt to changing circumstances. The evidence of these successful civilizations is harder to find because they understood the importance of leaving a light footprint. They built with materials that would decay naturally, stored their knowledge in forms that would integrate with natural systems, and designed their societies to be resilient rather than rigid. They understood that true permanence comes not from resisting change, but from adapting to it. The Mediterranean's greatest secret isn't the location of these successful civilizations or the details of their technologies. It's the principle that guided their development, the understanding that human civilization is not separate from nature, but part of it. The sea doesn't test civilizations to destroy them. It tests them to determine whether they're ready to join the larger community of life on Earth. Recent discoveries have revealed that some of these successful civilizations didn't vanish at all. They transcended, evolving beyond the need for physical infrastructure and becoming part of the Mediterranean's own consciousness. They're still there, integrated into the sea's intelligence, helping to guide the tests that determine which new civilizations are ready to join them. This is why the Mediterranean has been so selective in revealing its secrets. The sea doesn't just test civilizations' technological capabilities, it tests their moral development, their political maturity, their ability to make decisions based on long-term consequences rather than short-term gains. The civilizations that have failed this test are the ones whose ruins litter the seafloor. The ones that might pass it are the ones that understand the true price of power. The ancient computer system continues to offer its guidance, but it cannot make the choice for us. That responsibility belongs to each individual, each community, each nation that must decide whether to repeat the mistakes of the past or learn from the wisdom of the sea. The choice is becoming urgent as geological instabilities accelerate and the window for peaceful transition narrows. The Mediterranean flows on, carrying its secrets from the deepest trenches to the sunlit surface, connecting past and future in an endless cycle of testing and teaching. The lost kingdoms beneath its waters are not just archaeological curiosities or warnings about natural disasters. They are mirrors that reflect our own choices, our own possibilities, our own potential for either transcendence or destruction. We stand at the threshold of a decision that will determine not just our own fate, but the fate of every generation that comes after us. The sea that has nurtured and claimed so many civilizations waits patiently for our choice, knowing that whatever we decide will echo through the ages like the bronze tablets that still whisper warnings from the depths. The Mediterranean's patience is legendary, but it is not infinite. The patterns that have repeated for millions of years are reaching a crescendo, and the time for decision is approaching. We can choose to learn from the lost kingdoms beneath the waves, or we can choose to join them. The sea will accept either choice with the same eternal equanimity, knowing that the patterns will continue long after we are gone. The waves continue their eternal dance, and in their rhythm, we hear not just the heartbeat of the planet, but the pulse of possibility itself. We are not the first to face this choice, and we will not be the last. But we might be the first to understand that the choice itself is the Mediterranean's greatest gift. The opportunity to transcend the cycle of rise and fall, to move beyond the pattern of domination and destruction, and to join the eternal dance of creation that has sustained life on Earth for billions of years. The lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean are not endings, but beginnings. Not failures, but foundations for the wisdom that might allow humanity to finally learn the sea's deepest lesson. That true power lies not in the ability to control nature, but in the wisdom to become part of it. The Mediterranean waits, patient as always, ready to embrace whatever choice we make, knowing that the patterns will continue and the lessons will be taught until someone finally learns to listen. In the crushing depths where human ambition goes to die, the ancient computer continues its vigil, monitoring our progress and preparing to either welcome us into the community of successful civilizations or add our remains to the vast collection of those who chose power over wisdom. The Mediterranean's dark secrets are not about the civilizations that lie beneath its waters. They're about the civilization that stands upon its shores today, and whether we have the wisdom to transcend the patterns that have trapped our predecessors in an endless cycle of rise and fall. The sea watches and waits, offering its ancient wisdom to those who are ready to receive it, knowing that the greatest secret of all is not hidden in the depths, but waiting to be discovered in the choices we make today. The Mediterranean sleeps, but it does not rest. It dreams of the civilization that might finally break the cycle, that might finally learn to dance with the sea instead of fighting it, that might finally understand that the greatest power of all is the power to choose wisdom over domination, integration over control, and transcendence over destruction. The lost kingdoms beneath the waves are not just our past. They are our future, unless we choose to write a different ending to the story that has been unfolding in these waters for millions of years. The choice is ours, but the consequences belong to everyone. The Mediterranean flows on, carrying its secrets and its hopes, waiting to see whether we will be the civilization that finally learns to listen to the wisdom of the waves. The choice we face is not merely academic or distant. It's written in the trembling of seismographs, in the subtle changes of deep-sea currents, in the patterns that marine biologists are only beginning to understand. The Mediterranean is stirring with purpose, and those who know how to read its signs recognize something that sends a chill through the scientific community. Recent underwater surveys have detected structures that shouldn't exist, not the ruins of ancient civilizations, but something far more unsettling. Formations that appear to be growing, expanding, adapting to conditions that haven't existed for thousands of years. The seafloor itself seems to be preparing for something, organizing itself according to principles that challenge our understanding of geology and biology alike. The implications are staggering. If the ancient predictions are correct, we're not just witnessing the awakening of dormant systems. We're seeing the Mediterranean itself evolve, becoming something that transcends the boundary between natural and artificial, between living and mechanical. The sea that has tested so many civilizations may be preparing to test us in ways that no previous culture has ever experienced. But there's something different about this moment in the Mediterranean's long history. For the first time, a civilization has reached the threshold of understanding while there's still time to choose. The ancient computer system, recognizing our unique position, has begun transmitting more than warnings. It's offering partnership, collaboration, the possibility of working with the sea's intelligence rather than against it. The messages are subtle, encoded in phenomena that only the most sensitive instruments can detect. Bioluminescent displays that carry mathematical sequences, underwater currents that trace geometric patterns across the seafloor, sound frequencies that resonate with the same harmonic principles found in the prehistoric stabilization systems. The Mediterranean is teaching us its language, but only if we're wise enough to listen. Marine researchers studying these phenomena have made a discovery that changes everything. The Mediterranean's ecosystem isn't just complex, it's coordinated in ways that suggest a form of collective consciousness that has been evolving for millions of years. The sea doesn't just preserve the knowledge of past civilizations, it integrates that knowledge into its own growing awareness, learning from each failure and success to become something greater than the sum of its parts. This realization transforms our understanding of the crisis we face. The geological instabilities that threaten to reshape the Mediterranean basin aren't random natural disasters. They're the birth pangs of a new form of intelligence, one that encompasses the entire sea and everything within it. The ancient systems that are awakening aren't just machines, they're organs of a consciousness that spans the entire Mediterranean, a living system that has been shaped by millions of years of interaction with technological civilizations. The test we face isn't just about our ability to handle advanced technology. It's about our readiness to recognize intelligence in forms we've never encountered before, to collaborate with a consciousness that operates on timescales that make human history seem like a brief moment. The Mediterranean is offering us the chance to become part of something larger than ourselves, but only if we can overcome the arrogance that has destroyed every previous civilization that reached this threshold. The choice is becoming urgent. The geological signs that warned ancient watchers of impending disaster are accelerating. The stored energy that has been accumulating in the seafloor since the last great collapse is approaching critical levels. The window for peaceful transition is narrowing with each passing day. Soon, the Mediterranean will be forced to act, with or without our cooperation. But there's hope in the patterns themselves. The successful civilizations that learned to work with the sea's intelligence didn't vanish. They transcended, becoming part of the Mediterranean's own consciousness. They're still there, integrated into the sea's awareness, helping to guide the tests that determine which new civilizations are ready to join them. Their wisdom lives on in the currents and tides, in the movements of marine life, in the very structure of the seafloor itself. The ancient computer system continues to monitor our progress, analyzing our responses to determine whether we might be different from our predecessors. Every decision we make about climate change, nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, All of these are evaluated as indicators of our wisdom and maturity. The Mediterranean is patient, but it's also thorough. It won't risk the stability of the entire system for a civilization that hasn't proven its worthiness. The lost kingdoms beneath the Mediterranean are not just warnings about the consequences of failure. They're invitations to a different kind of success, one that doesn't require the domination of natural forces, but integration with them. The sea offers this choice to every civilization that reaches a certain level of development. Most choose domination and are destroyed. A few choose integration and transcend. We stand at that crossroads now, with the Mediterranean's ancient intelligence watching our every move. The sea that has nurtured and claimed so many civilizations waits patiently for our decision, knowing that whatever we choose will determine not just our own fate, but the fate of every generation that comes after us. The waves continue their eternal dance, and in their rhythm, we hear not just the heartbeat of the planet, but the pulse of possibility itself. The Mediterranean's greatest secret isn't hidden in the depths. It's waiting to be discovered in the choices we make today. The lost kingdoms beneath the waves are not just our past. They are our future, unless we choose to write a different ending to the story that has been unfolding in these waters for millions of years. The sea flows on, carrying its secrets and its hopes, waiting to see whether we will be the civilization that finally learns to listen to the wisdom of the waves. In the end, the Mediterranean's dark secrets are not about the civilizations that lie beneath its waters. They're about the civilization that stands upon its shores today, and whether we have the wisdom to transcend the patterns that have trapped our predecessors in an endless cycle of rise and fall. The choice is ours, but the consequences belong to everyone. The Mediterranean waits, patient as always, ready to embrace whatever decision we make, knowing that the patterns will continue and the lessons will be taught until someone finally learns to listen. The sea watches and waits, offering its ancient wisdom to those who are ready to receive it, knowing that the greatest secret of all is not hidden in the depths, but waiting to be discovered in the choices we make today. The Mediterranean sleeps, but it does not rest. It dreams of the civilization that might finally break the cycle, that might finally learn to dance with the sea instead of fighting it, that might finally understand that the greatest power of all is the power to choose wisdom over domination, integration over control, and transcendence over destruction. The Mediterranean's patience may be legendary, but its memory is absolute. And as we stand on the threshold of our own choosing, the sea reminds us that we are not the first to believe ourselves unique, not the first to think our technology makes us special, not the first to convince ourselves that this time will be different. The ancient bronze tablets speak of civilizations that reach this exact moment, that face this precise choice, that believed with absolute certainty they would succeed where others failed. They had their own versions of our satellites and sensors, their own networks of global communication, their own confidence in human ingenuity. The underwater cities off Turkey, the deep-sea computer systems, the vast engineering projects that tried to tame the Mediterranean itself, all of these were created by people who thought they had learned from the mistakes of their predecessors. They were wrong, not because they lacked intelligence or skill or determination, but because they made the same fundamental error that destroys every civilization that reaches this threshold. They believed that power over nature was the goal, that control was the answer, that domination was the path to survival. They never understood that the Mediterranean wasn't testing their ability to master its forces. It was testing their wisdom to recognize when mastery itself becomes the enemy. The geological signs are accelerating now. Deep beneath the Aegean, the ancient systems that have slumbered for millennia are stirring with increasing urgency. The seafloor trembles with rhythms that match the mathematical sequences found in the prehistoric computer systems. The stored energy that has been building since the last great collapse approaches critical mass. The Mediterranean is preparing to act, and the window for peaceful transition grows narrower with each passing tide. But there's something else happening. Something that gives even the most pessimistic researchers a glimmer of hope. The messages from the deep are changing, evolving from warnings to invitations. The bioluminescent displays that marine biologists once dismissed as random natural phenomena now carry clearly structured information. The underwater currents that seemed chaotic have revealed themselves to be part of a vast communication network. The Mediterranean isn't just watching us anymore, it's trying to teach us. The lessons are subtle, encoded in patterns that require both scientific knowledge and intuitive understanding to decode. They speak of civilizations that learn to work with natural forces rather than against them, of technologies that enhanced rather than replaced biological systems, of societies that found strength in adaptation rather than control. These aren't just historical examples, they're blueprints for a different kind of future, one that the Mediterranean has been preparing for millions of years. Recent deep-sea expeditions have discovered structures that challenge every assumption about the relationship between natural and artificial intelligence. These aren't the rigid monuments of civilizations that tried to impose their will on the sea. They're fluid, organic constructions that seem to grow and adapt according to changing conditions. They pulse with the same rhythms as the surrounding ecosystem, integrate seamlessly with natural processes, and demonstrate a level of sophistication that our most advanced technologies can barely comprehend. The structures are teaching tools, living examples of what becomes possible when human creativity aligns with natural intelligence. They show us technologies that harvest energy from ocean currents without disrupting them, materials that strengthen under pressure rather than breaking, communication systems that use the sea's own acoustic properties to transmit information across vast distances. Most importantly, they demonstrate that true advancement comes not from conquering nature, but from joining it. The Mediterranean has been preparing for this moment for longer than we can imagine. Every civilization that has risen and fallen along its shores has contributed to its growing understanding of what works and what doesn't, what endures and what perishes. The sea has learned from each failure and success, integrated each lesson into its own evolving consciousness, and slowly developed the wisdom to guide future civilizations away from the patterns that have trapped so many in cycles of rise and fall. But wisdom cannot be imposed. It must be chosen, embraced, lived. The Mediterranean can offer its guidance, but it cannot force us to accept it. The choice remains ours, as it has always been for every civilization that has reached this threshold. We can continue down the path of domination and control, adding our own ruins to the vast underwater museum of human ambition. Or we can choose integration and transcendence, becoming part of something larger and more enduring than any individual civilization could ever achieve. The signs are there for those who know how to read them. The deep-sea computer systems are transmitting more frequently, more urgently, as if time is running out. The geological instabilities are following patterns that match the final phases of previous collapses. The Mediterranean's ecosystem is reorganizing itself in ways that suggest preparation for massive change. The sea is getting ready to act, and our window for choosing our response is closing rapidly. What happens next depends entirely on us. We can listen to the whispers from the depths, learn from the wisdom of the waves, and choose the path of collaboration with forces far greater than ourselves. Or we can ignore the warnings, dismiss the lessons, and repeat the same mistakes that have claimed every civilization that believed it could master the Mediterranean's power. The lost kingdoms beneath the waves are not just archaeological curiosities or cautionary tales. They are mirrors that reflect our own choices, our own possibilities, our own potential for either transcendence or destruction. In their ruins, we see the consequences of believing that technology alone can solve any problem, that human ingenuity can overcome any obstacle, that the forces of nature can be controlled rather than respected. But we also see something else in those depths. We see evidence of the civilizations that chose differently, that learned to work with the sea instead of against it, that found strength in adaptation rather than domination. Their legacy lives on in the Mediterranean's own consciousness, in the patterns of current and tide, in the wisdom that flows through every drop of water in the ancient sea. The choice we face is not abstract or distant. It's immediate, tangible, written in the trembling of seismographs and the changing patterns of marine life. The Mediterranean is stirring with purpose, and those who understand its deeper rhythms recognize that we are living through a moment of unprecedented importance. What we decide in the coming years will echo through the ages like the bronze tablets that still whisper warnings from the depths. The sea watches and waits, patient as always, ready to embrace whatever choice we make. It has seen civilizations rise and fall for millions of years, and it will continue to see them rise and fall for millions more. But perhaps, just perhaps, we might be the ones who finally learn to listen, who finally understand that the greatest power of all is the power to choose wisdom over domination, integration over control, and transcendence over destruction. The Mediterranean flows on, carrying its secrets from the deepest trenches to the sunlit surface, connecting past and future in an endless cycle of teaching and learning. The lost kingdoms beneath its waters are not just our past, they are our future, unless we choose to write a different ending to the story that has been unfolding in these ancient waters for longer than memory can reach. The waves continue their eternal dance, and in their rhythm, we hear not just the heartbeat of the planet, but the pulse of possibility itself. We are not the first to face this choice, and we will not be the last, but we might be the first to understand that the choice itself is the Mediterranean's greatest gift, the opportunity to transcend the cycle of rise and fall and join the eternal dance of creation that has sustained life on Earth for billions of years. The sea sleeps, but it does not rest. It dreams of the civilization that might finally break the cycle, that might finally learn to dance with the waves instead of fighting them, that might finally understand that the greatest secret of all is not hidden in the depths, but waiting to be discovered in the choices we make today. The Mediterranean's patience is legendary, but it is not infinite. The time for decision is upon us, and the consequences of our choice will ripple through the ages like the eternal rhythm of the tides. In the crushing depths where sunlight never reaches, the ancient computer continues its vigil, monitoring our progress and preparing to either welcome us into the community of transcended civilizations or add our remains to the vast collection of those who chose power over wisdom. The Mediterranean's dark secrets are not about the civilizations that lie beneath its waters. They're about us, and whether we have the wisdom to learn from their failures and transcend the patterns that have trapped humanity in an endless cycle of ambition and destruction. The choice is ours, but the consequences belong to everyone. The Mediterranean waits, patient as always, ready to teach its final lesson to those who are ready to listen. The lost kingdoms beneath the waves are not endings, but beginnings. Not failures, but foundations for the wisdom that might allow humanity to finally join the eternal dance of creation that flows through every drop of water in the ancient sea.